Aunty Joy Wandin Murphy, storyteller, author, and artist. Acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. Cultural warning. Aboriginal and/or Torres Strait Islander peoples should be respectfully advised that this PowerPoint contains the images, places, and names of people who have passed away, which might cause sorrow. This presentation is about the respected Aboriginal elder Aunty Joy Wandin Murphy. She is from the Wurundjeri tribe, whose land is located in the heart of the Yarra Valley in Victoria. It incorporates Healesville, the Birrarung or Yarra River, Badger Creek, Watts River, and the slopes of Mount Riddle. Aunty Joy frequently gives the traditional welcome to country greeting at Melbourne events and was invited to be the creative artist and lyricist for the opening and closing ceremony songs in the 2006 Commonwealth Games. She is an Officer of the Order of Australia given in 2006 for her service to the community, particularly the Aborigines through significant contributions in the fields of social justice, land rights, equal opportunity, art, and reconciliation. The Wurundjeri people take their name from the Wurrung language. Warren means the managum, which grows along the Birrarung or Yarra River, and Jiri is the grub which lives next to the tree. The Wurundjeri people are known as the Witchetty Grub people. Aunty Joy is the great-great-niece of William Barrack, the last traditional Narragansett or head man of the Wurundjeri Clan. William Barrack fought for the rights of the Indigenous people. This was to have their own land, shelter, and continue their traditions of looking after each other. But more about this later. Aunty Joy has been a storyteller for many years, visiting schools to pass on her knowledge and to teach her language. She recently wrote the book Welcome to Country, which is illustrated by Lisa Kennedy. Aunty Joy wrote this book to teach both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people about traditions of her ancestors. She also wanted to promote a positive relationship between the Indigenous and non-Indigenous community. She wants to strengthen the Wurrung language, and this is due to Aunty Joy not being allowed to speak her language at school, only at home. She feels that most of her generation missed out on language and feels a huge responsibility to pass it on to the next generation. Her book, Welcome to Country, contains the Wurrung language throughout. Welcome to Country is about sharing information and educating each other to promote a more harmonious community and therefore a sense of belonging. The book talks about respecting our elders and the land and only taking what we need or what we can give back. Aunty Joy wrote the book to remind people about the struggles Indigenous people went through and continue to go through to this day. She said in an interview with Siobhan Hunt from Kinderling Radio that she wanted to honour all the traditions of her people, especially after they had been stripped of their land, belongings, traditions, and their respect. After seeing what her father went through and hearing what her ancestors went through, she said that she knew she wanted to give something back. Aunty wrote about how important it is to respect our ancestors and our land, but her ancestors were not respected when their land was taken from them back in the 1800s. Finding it increasingly difficult to find shelter and food, some Aboriginal elders, including William Barrack, began petitioning for their own land for their people. During this time, many Aborigines died of starvation, introduced disease, and confrontations with European settlers. Eventually they were granted 2,300 acres of land, which was increased to 4,850 acres. But this was still only 1% of the land the first people previously occupied. This area became known as Coranderrk Station and was located on Aunty Joy's great-great-uncle, or William Barrack, and his clan's land. Coranderrk was established for the Wurundjeri people and other clans from the Kulin or Victorian area. Aunty Joy writes in her book to respect the land and only take what you can give back. This seemed to be occurring at Coranderrk Station by 1870. The property had become very successful, and this was due to the Indigenous people working alongside managers to plant crops and build housing as required. Unfortunately, Coranderrk became co-opted by European settlers, and this was because it was hugely successful. The Victorian government and the Aboriginal Protection Board decided to close Coranderrk and sell the land to the European settlers. During this time, the Aboriginal Protection Board withdrew its support to the Indigenous people and provided no assistance anymore. The living conditions at Coranderrk began to decline hugely. William Barrack and the other elders petitioned for 10 years to prevent the closing of Coranderrk, knowing that the eviction would lead to total displacement yet again. In 1886, the young people of Coranderrk were forced to leave, and this was due to the introduction of the Half-Caste Act. This meant that any person under the age of 34 who was of mixed descent was prohibited from living or visiting the settlement. Once again, children were separated from families, and consent was required to visit them by the Aboriginal Protection Board. Visitation was rarely granted. Only the elderly were left at Coranderrk, and due to being unable to maintain the property, and due to the decreasing numbers of people at Coranderrk, it gave the government a reason for closing. Coranderrk was closed in 1924, and those who were left were relocated to more than 4 hours away, to Gippsland. Aunty Joy writes Welcome to Country to honour her ancestors and to acknowledge all that they did. She writes in her book, Thank you for their courage, strength, and integrity. And after researching their history, it is understandable why this is so important to Aunty Joy. Her ancestors showed great courage, strength, and integrity in fighting for their own land, their own shelter and food, and for also their honour in a time when many were against them. Aunty writes about welcoming us onto her land, but you must be invited or request permission first. This is about showing respect, rather than just taking what is not yours in the first place. And this is what she feels happened to her ancestors. In 1998, the descendants of Coranderrk were able to buy a small portion of the land back, and this which was taken from the ancestors. Aunty Joy says it isn't about having the land, it's about remembering the history of the area and what her ancestors went through. Thank you for listening.